I'm Angela Keaton. I am the executive director of the Randolph Bourne Institute, which runs antiwar.com, which is the best and most important foreign policy site in the world. It happens to be staffed by libertarians. It's not a libertarian site, but we understand the philosophy, and we kind of come from the old school of Murray Rothbard talking about the centrality of empire and our fight against the state. Was my libertarian and anarchist and objectivist family background instrumental in shaping my worldview? Well, I'm sitting here on a perfectly good Thursday night in the back of a winery with a bunch of, there's machine and construction equipment. So I would, talking to a bunch of libertarians at a, I think, event that's nominally sponsored by the Koch brothers in some way. So I'd say it's instrumental. But it's a complicated question, to be sure. It's I've come to a place in life where I have to evaluate everything that's gone before to see where I'm going next.
Yeah.
So, all right, what are some of the key values for a libertarian household? Don't beat your kids would be one. Don't beat your wife would be another. Don't touch anybody's genitals. I'd just say that's a good general policy. I mean, unless you're so small, you got to be cleaned regularly, And then you can't really talk anyway, but still, it's just, everybody keep their hands to themselves and mind their own business, except, in the cases where you've got to comfort, read the signs of comforting, children and, people who are more vulnerable and taking care of the elderly. But yeah, a good healthy sense of mind your own business. I think the liberals call that boundaries or something now. I don't know what it means, but just, this is me, that's you, separate. And yeah, don't punch people, don't throw them down the stairs, don't throw them into the walls, don't institutionalize any of your family members against their will because they literally have no rights, and this is a very common thing that no one wants to talk about. It should be utterly understood as evil and a violation of everything libertarians claim to stand for. Certainly sexual privacy and autonomy, which means, no, if there's no invite here, so don't go there. Everybody in the conversation has to know what's going on. And it's ideal if there isn't huge power disparities, especially when you're dealing with people who don't have any rights. And in this country, well, I guess everywhere, there's no such thing as youth rights. Children aren't really people. And that's something I hope that we can talk about in some years to come when we've solved this war problem. How have my politics have evolved all throughout time, and how am I challenging mainstream libertarianism? Well, it's interesting. I mean, the basic core of, the basics of Rothbard are still there, and still the basics of objectivism. I know Ayn Rand isn't popular anymore, and there's very good reasons for that. Highly problematic, as people would say, but I haven't veered too far about away from empire or away from understanding the individual as valuable, as worthwhile, as autonomous, and something that just by being born a human having dignity. So I haven't really strayed from the basics. But I think most, and this is I think true of most people who are really into Rothbard, you go all over the inner spectrum, left to right and where you're coalition building. But the past several years, I've rethought certain of my philosophies, certainly in relationship to feminism and how libertarian men see feminism and womenism and women's studies and the concepts of gender and sex and sexual violence. And I've had to rethink I guess I've gotten old and cynical, and I'm very suspect about certain kinds of values. For better or worse, when I was young, I was involved with when I was a kid, I was involved with the 90s anti-PC movement, which is really kind of unfortunate because one, I don't think I got any more free speech rights, but also because it forced me to align with neoconservatives, and that's something I regret, something I'm really embarrassed of. And people can change. Sometimes they even change against their own will, but change is generally hard, but they can change, and it's okay to look back at your life and say, no, that was wrong. Like, no, that's nothing to do. And everybody has, you reach a certain age and all, you're going to have some kind of past. But I find that regrettable, and it's okay. Like, I think it's okay for other people, too, to say, this part of my libertarian past was really stupid or wrong. And, I've changed. In the past few years, I've changed on the matter of, I guess I had some residual sympathy for, nonsense like Christina Hoff Sommers, which is really terrible and wrong on everything. But people really like the equity feminism, which is a bunch of made-up nonsense, or, classical liberal feminism, which is, every, rich white woman can be herself. Thank God. I wouldn't want them to stifle her oppression in any way. Yeah, I have no regard for any of the typically liberal, corporate liberal, white feminist feminism, or the Christina Hoff Sommers and all the, I guess now we have Barry Weiss, she'd be the new modern version of that, who just really hate women. And, that's fine, that's, certainly, some women's right to hate other women, but I'm certainly not going to be deluded into thinking it's anything other than what it is, which is a hatred of women. My brand of feminism, I don't really know. I mean, I'm a feminist for purposes of certain conversations and not for others. Back in 2015, late 2015, I started, adding more people from sex work Twitter. I was following more of those on Twitter. And there were these women, one was named Bardo Smith, another one was named Maureen Schiefeld, and another one was named Yoshin Laurds. And they had come up with a concept called Give Your Money to Women, and it's about restorative justice to women through money, because that's what we value in a capitalist society, money. And what makes the most difference for victims? Money. So it's a huge swath of prison abolitionism there, and these women are obviously really radical anarchists. But once I kind of internalized those values, and it took a long time, it's only really recently where I'm really starting to see that. When I started to see what patriarchy actually looks like, and I've had a long enough life experience, that yes, the patriarchy exists. It only doesn't exist to people who have some different, mind magic they do on yourself. And people can do mind tricks and delude themselves or whatever. I don't care. But reality is, yes, the disparity, of course, between men and women is huge. Beginning with, in most cases, physical size. So, as a right-leaning kind of militia-type anarchist friend of mine said recently, yeah, women are probably afraid because men are stronger, and they probably are afraid most of the time. And I'm like, yeah, sir, that's exactly the case. Yes, they do have a lot of fear. And you have to either develop a lot of defense mechanisms or defend yourself or figure out some way of coping. And I don't necessarily completely dislike women who in various ways suck up to men, because that's where the power is. But I'm not interested. Okay, to conservatives who don't think patriarchy is real. Well, I ask them about things. I say, like, okay, you believe you're a capitalist, right? You have money, good, exchange, goods for services, the medium of exchange exists. Don't you think being a wife and mother is one of the most important things a woman can do? If so, why isn't that compensated? And that goes back to the women I talked about earlier for the Give Your Money to Women discussion. There's articles about that out there. But if society does not pay wives and mothers, it's obviously valued at zero, which means it's worthless. And that usually makes conservatives see it a little differently. But I'm still working. I mean, I just, it's women I'm more thinking about, not so much in the categories of liberal, conservative, or race, even though I'm thinking about those things in terms of, where each woman is placed and what she might have faced in life. It's, right now I'm just kind of looking at women generally. Yeah. What can people do to further the cause of peace, besides not being jackasses? Get to know their neighbors, and I harp on this a lot. This is a Karl Hess thing. There's nothing original about this, but if folks know their libertarian history, you should be reading a little bit of Karl Hess. It's good for your health, and his life is really interesting and amazing. Another thing you can do is just, people have social networking, people talk to people. A way of influencing people is to gently send a link or put a link on your page, not sending dad spam or whatever that's called, grandpa emails or forwards. You can be really simple with information. But if you're talking about peace in your own life, it still goes back to you have to start with you. Like, peace begins with you and your behavior with others. You know, free trade is a good thing, and people can trade when people see each other as individuals, but we're a long way away from that. I don't think the understanding of individuality as part of a human being, I don't think our brains are even adapted to that. It's going to be several hundred years, maybe 1,000 years before people understand the concept of the individual.
Do you think that sometimes in our support for people who we see as on sort of the victim side of different nation states, whether it be Palestine or the Kurds, like trying to defend their territory, do you think that people can sometimes fall into nationalist tendencies in their defense against war? And how would you respond to that? Do you think it's a problematic thing, and how would you deal with it generally?
Well, nationalism, and I don't want to use the old objectivist sawhorse about collectivism, but look, if you grew up in the U.S., you have a certain understanding of your privilege and a place in the empire. So nationalism in the context of the United States is utterly ludicrous and has been terribly damaging to the world. Also, nationalism itself requires a lot of superstition. You know, believing that if you were born right here in this particular time in history, that somehow you're unique beyond being an individual. There's the collective is unique, and it's not. It's only the individual that is. You know, everything's contextual, but it's very hard to have subtle discussions of foreign policy with people, which is why I don't really talk about national liberationist movements. It's really first of all, I don't try to interfere with the causes of other anarchists and liberationists unless specifically invited in. I think that's just good manners and just, polite. But, when people talk about, let's say, support for a Palestinian state, no one wants a state for anything. A state's horrible, it's ridiculous. But in the context of having your land stolen and being occupied, the longest occupation, military occupation in history, and one that's particularly brutal because it's fully funded and supported by the U.S., no matter how many mental tricks we want to play on ourselves. The U.S. is responsible for this madness, and I know the U.K. has a role in it too, but the U.S. really should be ashamed of funding and supporting an apartheid state. But, in the context of that, that's why Palestinians want that. It's really none of my business. One state, two state, no state. What other people do really isn't my business. And this is something that's really hard to impress upon people, that, nationalism is just one more way of not minding our own business.
So I think, unfortunately, our efforts to decouple American libertarianism away from racism, sexism, and nationalism can sometimes seem like a fruitless effort. Do you think this endeavor is worthwhile?
Okay. I am decoupling libertarianism from racism, sexism, homophobia, and just generalized collectivist nonsense and superstition and BS. I am doing it. Whether it's worthwhile or not, I'm going to be the judge of that for myself, because my efforts on that are about me and no one else. But basically, I want to decouple. I want to get rid of classical liberalism. I mean, that's a nice gateway to rope people in. But punk rockers of my generation always saw reason and Cato as a way of, getting by the man. It was not seen as like that's the ideal, or that in itself is a means to an end or an end of any kind. But we were woefully misinformed and naive then. So. It's funny because we have, Nazis that showed up in the Libertarian movement, and there were complaints about the various people for a long, long time. But this one guy, the crying Nazi, and I'm thinking, Christopher Cantwell, who's crying now? When, people used to make fun of me and saying, I want to decolonize libertarianism, and, guys like that would laugh at me, and like, well, who's laughing, who's laughing now? I'm laughing because I'm spending my Thursday evening in the back of a bar in Austin, which I can't think of better things to do, really. It's pretty awesome. So
nice.
It's the problems with classical liberalism. First of all, it's an ideology made by a very specific group of people who had a very specific life experience in a time that is not necessarily particularly honorable. The times of, mercantilism, colonialism, chattel slavery, and so It's not universal. People always say, oh, it's universal principles. Yeah, universal for you. If you're some, WASP guy from Connecticut who's 190 years old and sits on $1 million, yeah, it's great for you. I don't know how that is for everyone else. I think you might want to ask other people who don't come from that what their experience might be with classical liberalism. Classical liberalism being whatever it is that the elite culture is currently selling as democracy or capitalism, which is not the free market. And so, it's right-wing socialism, and I don't like socialism. We're right-wingers, so there we go. Do I have hope about anything? Wow, that's a great question. Young anarchist lesbians are great. That gives me hope. No, there's plenty of young people and 30-somethings who came, the best of what came out of the Ron Paul movement stayed, and that's the core, and the rest who all went in different directions or became the alt-right, alt-white, whatever the hell that is. That doesn't need to be part of this. We don't need that. We're not desperate. We can have standards. I think it was in the great book. It usually begins with Ayn Rand, which is like one of the best comic novels ever. The part where the quote that to Murray Rothbard's attributed, we don't have to take in every piece of shit off the street. We don't have to do that. We can have standards. It's okay. We don't need guys who sacrifice goats and fuck them, or whatever they do with goats, or we don't. There's a lot of people who really just aren't, totally necessary to the functioning of a diverse libertarian movement. If you want to advance a freer society, you have to be a good example to other people who might be looking at you wondering what kind of person wants a freer society. And I think that's the thing, is like, having some sense of boundaries, restraint, character, keeping your selfishness to an objectivist sense and not in the common understanding of selfishness. Yes, you have to be that person who can live in a free society. What I do like the whole, next year in Kapistan toast, is that a lot of the libertarian men I know who are big deals in the libertarian world, and big shots, wouldn't last 10 seconds in Kapistan, and I can't wait to watch that. So I know I'm going to win. I'm going to win, so it's okay. I'm going to be around a long time. What advice I'd have for young anarchists and libertarians? Don't go professional. Always make sure you have many sources of income. This isn't one of those crazy, econ talks. It's just like common sense. You've got to figure out, where you're going to have your source of wealth from, and, figure out your various gigs, hustles, and whatever privilege you have, utilize that, because sooner or later, you realize how small and smaller you are in measure to the state. And if you can use that privilege to help other people who don't have that privilege to be freer and have less violence in their lives, maybe fewer cops, maybe fewer wars, then that's probably overall the best thing a young person can do.
All right, so where should people go to follow your work, and or maybe just to learn more about the subjects that you're passionate about?
The website is antiwar.com, and some of the best and unusual and eclectic and eccentric people have worked there through the years, and I'm really proud to have been a part of that.
Nice. Surprise question. What's the best or worst scenario for LP 2020 president ticket?
The best and worst scenario depends for whom. For the LP ticket, the worst scenario is Bill Weld and just about any other person, because it'll just be incomprehensible. Yeah, Bill Weld's the worst. I guess a Bill Weld, John McAfee ticket or Adam Kokesh ticket, and I don't even, it's just whatever. I mean, they're public figures. It's fair comment. Yeah, I think any of those scenarios are going to be a train wreck as usual.
What's the best?
The best scenario? None of the above.
What if it were Angela Keaton?
What if it were Angela Keaton? I don't know who that'd be very unfortunate for a lot of people.